Hi everybody, welcome to Deconstructing Unschooling. This is my new web series where we're going to talk about all things unschooling related. My name is Amy Milstein. I'm a parent of two kids, ages 13 and 9. I also blog about unschooling and learning at unschooling.nyc.com, which you can check out as well. So what is this thing we call unschooling? Well, legally it's a form of homeschooling. It's legal in all 50 states. But what it really is simply encouraging the self-directed learner that all kids are at birth and just keeping that going without ever enrolling them in a school. And this makes a lot of sense. You know, when I first started learning about it, I thought, well, that makes sense because my two kids are very different in the way they learn. And so I couldn't really see how, if they went to a school and suddenly they were told they had to learn, you know, the same way, the same things, at the same age, I didn't see how that could work well for them. And I think that's the case with most kids who are given the opportunity to learn outside of school. They really flourish at their own speed. And I'll give you an illustration of the day that the light bulb went on in my head. When my daughter was little, and she's older, she was about 2, I started playing word games with her and, you know, pointing out letters and tracing letters and showing her words when we walked around the streets of the city. And she loved it. She was really into it. She had a little electronic thing that would say the letters and what words started with it. You had to, you know, pick the letter or whatever. And she loved that game. So, and also we live in New York City, so all the taxis in the city at the time had in the back of the taxi complaints, dial 1-800-NYC-TAXI. And every time we got in the car, she would ask me to point that out, and I would read along with the letters. And from the time she was about 3, if you wrote the word complaints on a piece of paper, she would recognize it, and taxi. And so I just thought this was great. But you know what I really thought was, I am an amazing teacher. I mean, look how awesome this is. I have instilled a love of words and letters and reading. And she was an early reader. She was reading by the time she was about 4. And I really thought that this was all due to my enthusiasm, which I had then instilled in her. So then, about 4 years later, my son was born. And so when he was about 2, I thought, okay, here we go. Let's do it. And I started trying to do the same thing with him, and he would literally cover his ears and yell for me to stop. Or if we were at home, he would run from the room. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And so much for my amazing teaching skills. And what was made super clear at that moment was that it wasn't that I had instilled the love of words and reading into my child. I had not opened her brain and bestowed this upon her. That was her natural inclination, and it just so happened that I facilitated it. It was a coincidence. It was completely luck. And with my son, that wasn't his interest. He didn't care about words and letters at that age. He was way more into building things with whatever he could get his hands on. And so it was a really big wake-up call for me to realize how different my two kids were in the way that they learned and in the interests that they had. So my son did, of course, learn to read on his own time when he was about almost 7, which is still fairly young. And it was like magic. It felt like magic to me, and it was what people kept telling me would happen, but I didn't really believe it because of the way my daughter had learned to read, and I still couldn't quite divorce myself from the thought that I had something to do with it, that it was, you know, sort of due to my input. And so when people said, don't worry, you know, he'll learn. It's a developmental thing. He'll pick it up. You know, there were books in the house. I was always reading out loud to the kids, which they both loved, and Maya, my daughter, was always reading. And one day, literally, he went from struggling to read really, really easy books to reading Magic Treehouse, which is a chapter book for for young readers. It was astonishing. But it totally proved what everyone had been telling me, that reading is developmental, and every kid, if exposed to books and words and not forced into it, will pick it up. And I really believe now, I believe that that's true. I've seen it happen over and over again with kids that we know. So that's just one example. And that is what unschoolers sort of do. We just live our lives, and we observe our kids, and we know how they learn and what they like, and we give them opportunities to follow those interests. It's not a methodology. It's not something that I can say to you, okay, here you go. You want to unschool? This is how you do it. Step 1, step 2, step 3. The only thing I can say for certain is what you don't do is you don't buy a curriculum, sit it down on the table and say to your kid, this is what you're going to learn, and you have no say in the matter. That's not unschooling. Wendy Presnitz, who I really admire and who's the editor of Life Learning magazine, calls it life learning, and that's a really apt description of what we do. We just live our lives, and our kids live their lives along with us, and they learn. They learn what they need to know, they learn what they're interested in, and we do it as we go. And everybody is going to be different. There's no one right way to do this because everybody's life is different. I live in New York City. My life is wildly different from someone who's living in Colorado or in Montana or anywhere. So I would not presume to tell them how to live their life with their kids. Every child is different. Every family is different. And that's kind of the wonderful, and I think for people a little scary thing about it, is that it's all up to you, but it's all up to you. But there's also maybe a little too much worry that we put on things because we've all grown up in this culture of we need to know certain things at a certain age. And if you don't, your whole life is doomed. And of course, that's not true. I would say to anyone who's looking into unschooling is, your kids already know how to learn what they need to learn. They've been doing it for a few years on their own, with your encouragement and your help when they need it. And that's basically what we do. We just keep doing it once they get older. So that's it. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff as the weeks go on. I hope I'm going to post about once a week a new video on different topics. I'm going to have a comments section. If you want to comment, good, bad, or otherwise, feel free. If you don't call me names, I won't delete it. And if you have suggestions for topics or questions you'd like to have answered, I will do my best. So that's it. Thanks for coming. Oh, one final thing. Every week, I'm going to do a little shout out to someone who's invented something that I really love and without which my life would not be the same. And so this week, an obvious choice is to Willis Carrier from Angola, New York. He invented modern air conditioning. Thank you, Willis. Without you, I would not be sitting here right now talking to this camera because I would be too hot. So that's it. Thanks for coming. See you next time. Bye.